You are listening to the MD Clone Talk Data Podcast, the show that uncovers healthcare insights, technology innovation, and discovers new ways to understand data possibilities. We bring together industry leaders, customers, and innovators to drive the future of care delivery. Let's talk data.
Welcome to another episode of Talk Data, the podcast where we delve into the latest trends, insights, and success stories in the world of data and healthcare. I'm your host, Daniel Blumenthal, and today we're excited to be joined by Patty Hayward, General Manager of Healthcare and Life Sciences at Talkdesk, a global provider of artificial intelligence-powered customer experience technology that serves enterprises of all sizes. Patty, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Excited to be here.
Some of the new things that we're seeing today, and I don't know if there's a better way to say it, but automation is upon us. And I wonder if you can reflect around on what does automation mean today? And I think it might be intriguing to think about how has that changed even in the last year, 2 years?
Yeah. Well, when you think about automation especially on the provider side, there really hasn't been a lot historically. I think everybody tried to push people to their patient portals to do self-service, but even when you went there, really all you could do was pay a bill, maybe look up what physicians are there, but then you had to call someone to do anything with it. There's some that are ahead of others, but for the most part, you're not getting a lot out of any digital interactions. And even if you do offer that, a lot of people prefer just to call because of the limitations in those digital experiences. So, self-service is not a big thing in the provider world. You get more of it on the payer side, certainly being able to look up what your benefits are, et cetera. But especially on the provider side, which I'll spend a little bit more time focusing on because I think there's the biggest rocks to move there, is how do we get folks to think differently about how they approach their contact center? Today, most people are like, how do I deflect? Which is great. I mean, you definitely want to automate things and you want to be able to offer self-service on our appointment scheduling, paying your bills, things like that. But we've also inherently built in a ton of complexity into the systems and made it really, really difficult to do self-service in a way that's meaningful. So, really tackling things from soup to nuts is important, and looking at not just the technology, but the process and the culture of which you're really addressing these things and aligning. I always like to start with how do we align with executive goals and objectives of the organization and work backwards to then drive what we want to transform. And in thinking about contact center, step one is really how do we automate as much as we can? How do we automate the easy things that we can so that we free up time for those folks in the contact center to act as more care navigators? How do we help them navigate a difficult and complex journey oftentimes through these organizations that we serve? And then thinking about how we turn the contact center into more of a value driver. And that looks really different from like banking, retail, where they're trying to sell things. Whereas here, what we're trying to do is get them to take action on their health. Because most of these organizations have value-based care contracts where they're trying to hit specific metrics, right? And these metrics either put them in bonus payments or penalty payments, penalty phases. And ideally, if you can stop being just an ask-answer machine and you start really empowering agents with more real-time information, understanding of what they're supposed to do next on their clinical care journey, and really empower them with those tools in real time, you can start to be proactive instead of just reactively answering a question, but you can start proactively asking questions and getting folks to do things like if they call into because they're out of prescription refills. Well, it turns out they haven't had their annual physical, they haven't had a mammogram, they haven't had a diabetic foot exam, any of the different things that we know they should be doing in order to make sure we're keeping them at the healthiest level they can be. That is good for the patient. It's also really good for the organization because they hit their goals and objectives.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. You talked about a golden moment. I want to talk about maybe some aha moments with technology. And I wonder, you are an AI-powered customer experience operation, and I wonder if you can share what's been an aha moment or maybe just a wow moment
Yeah.
with technology development that has changed the way you're doing business?
So, I mean, everybody's aware of sort of the large language model AI evolution. We've been working with AI since 2018. So we've had AI infused in our platform for many, many years. But the speed of innovation and evolution that we've seen over the past year is pretty mind blowing. The ability to, it started out with like, how do we summarize a call? We transcribe it real time. Now it's like, how can we translate languages in real time so that you don't necessarily always have to have someone who is fluent of languages or bring in language services. I think the ability to program this AI has gotten so much easier. You can now just say things like, hey, I need you can write it out as opposed to code or have to think of every utterance that a person would say. We've all dealt with bots on voice or digital. You ask it a question, if it's not programmed correctly, it's going to tell you it doesn't understand. And you can ask me things like whatever, right? And then a lot of them are just closed down in the digital world where you can only push their buttons. And if you don't want something on their buttons, like, okay, you can't really interact with it. So this allows them so much easier to access the data that they have out there. So a lot of people have rich data on their website, but it's not easily found. And you can't anticipate how everybody intakes data. I sort of liken it to if you've played with ChatGPT versus Google, right? You go and Google something, and of course it gives you a ton of information, but you have to sift through it and find what you want. And it's usually links to websites and all sorts of things like that, which was amazing when we first had it because we didn't know we had all those things. Now you ask a question of ChatGPT, it goes out to the websites, crawls it, and provides you a summary, right? And then if you want more, you can ask more questions and it'll continue. You can have a full conversation. So that is really different than what we've had in the past. And that's really driving a lot of innovation around experiences that people can have, right? And then, being able to constrain those to just look at the information that you have in the systems of record that you want people to access. And not go outside and access other things has been a really great development as well. But the speed and the ability to interact is pretty mind-blowing.
You made me reflect on many a conversation and chatbot conversation as well with telecommunications companies and the frustrations that has brought. And I wonder, our ability and one of our challenges maybe in healthcare is to think about experiences that patients, consumers have in other industries, so to speak, and what that can look like inside of healthcare. And one of the things that sort of brings to mind is that there are some differences in healthcare. One of them is, among many others, for us, especially at MD Clone, is privacy, patient data privacy, and the like. And I wonder how your team is considering that. What unique challenges come up in the healthcare industry because of patient privacy?
Yeah. Well, I think we have obviously a highly regulated industry, and we also work in the financial sector, which is also a highly regulated industry, very huge need for privacy, and to, detect things like fraud and different things like that. So that's super forefront. And we offer some really great tools to do authentication, to detect spoofing of phone numbers, voices, things like that can help to protect patient identity and patient information. I mean, all that's super critical, to offer the same experience as Delta Airlines, when you call them and they greet you by name and know what your itinerary was and anticipate what you might be calling about is awesome. But we'd have to sort of pass a barrier first to make sure we're authenticated and we know that we're talking to the person that we're supposed to be talking to. So that's been a part of the reason why I think we've had some hindrance to this. But I think there's also another more prevalent reason, and that is that when you think about providers, their core tenet is to provide good clinical care. It's not to provide an exceptional customer experience. Their core tenet is we're here to heal you and we're here to help you along your care journey. And so they have to be able to fit that in with low margins, all of the things, that challenges that we're seeing that they're facing here. So being able to offer them something that's more out of the box is really important. That was something we realized right away, is that we couldn't expect these guys to go and build it. It just wasn't going to happen. You're going to get a lot of non-adoption. You have to actually intentionally build it, work with the organizations to ensure that it's working for them. And you need to have in my opinion, a full group that can support them going along, right? So understanding their journey and their customer success going forward, and continue to work with them on adoption and new things, because that's really important. The standard thing that I see, and that I'm working really hard to ensure we don't continue to do, is that what folks want to do is just lift and shift, right? Well, I have a deadline. I got to get off this old platform. Old contracts expired, or, end of life for technology, which is what we often do here in healthcare, is wait till it goes end of life. And so then you're just like lifting and shifting, which doesn't, and then people get tired. They get tired of change. They have a full day job. They don't really want to go out. So it's really important to align those executive leadership goals and objectives, the return on investment, and really top to bottom align goals and how you're going to get there. That is super crucial for adoption. And you probably, with your data, think about, how does it get used? Data, we're awash in data. How it's presented and how we use it is really the key, and how it's adopted and pulled into everyday use. That's really key for transformation.
Indeed. And one aspect of that is being able to surface the right information at the right time gets everyone excited about adoption of these sorts of technologies or services or new processes. And as MD Clone is working to try to put that information in the right time, the right people's hands, there's no doubt that we are producing more and more information. And I really emphasize that word, information versus data. We are producing more useful information, meaningful insights that can be used. And in many ways now we're shifting towards the ability to do that in a much more predictive way, which certainly has an impact on the type of work that you're building. And perhaps you can share a bit on that predictive element, and being able to share that next step as a way to impress both the patient in this case, but also the providers to trust the new technology, to trust the adoption, because it actually is adding above and beyond what we can provide today. So maybe you can share something in that direction.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the reasons why we've really built out all of the connections to those different systems of record and different, knowledge management tools, Power BI, data analytics areas are all really important so that we can surface that information. The thing I think that we power, so you guys would power sort of the insights, right, that need to be surfaced. What we would do is listen to the conversation, understand when that's relevant, and be able to sort of bring that up in real time for those organizations. And that's really the key, right? Is how do you bring up insights in real time when it's in workflow? Those are the types of things that I think become transformational versus just being, again, awash in data. And, I think the old way agent assists used to work was you'd listen in, but you just bring up articles. And then as an agent, you have to read them. All of us have had conversations. For someone to be expected to read and then regurgitate in real time, it's not really incredibly useful, which is why we don't have very much that can be answered in these contact centers. You end up with basic ask answers. So being able to actually help these folks understand in real time what's supposed to be done is important. I think the other important aspect of all of this is, how do we think about even just how we look at our agents as we start to take some of these easy questions off of their plate? Those jobs become harder, right? I've had conversations with folks in contact centers of late who have said to me, my job's gotten a lot harder. It used to be that I had a bunch of really easy questions throughout the day that I would answer, and that probably took up 80% of my time. And now I find most of my day is really complicated discussions. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? And they're like, well, some days great, some days not. I am getting a lot more training. I feel like I'm a better part of the team. I feel like I am an asset now that they're developing versus just kind of I could hire any of you. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic to think about how you have a career path in contact center for your agents, because you are going to need to develop them in different ways than we have in the past, which has just been kind of churning. I talked to one organization who said it took them for basic, this is before any of the AI came up. It took them 3 months to allow an agent to answer a call. This is a big academic medical center. 3 months for them to answer a call, but their average tenure is 18 months. That's pretty crazy. That's going to be really hard to maintain. And it's very, very costly if you think of acquisition of an agent, right? And then tenure of an agent. So really rethinking, I think, the whole cultural aspect of just how we think about contact center is going to have to shift. Because it's going to become, with all of the margin cuts and just, you see all the things that are happening with the federal government and the different cuts that they're making, it's going to be really important that we think about not only how do we reduce costs, but how do we increase revenue. That both things have to happen in order for margins to get to a point of viability.
So it's been great to chat with you and hear about how this does apply in a clearly very closely related area to the type of work that we're doing. And you already identified there's clear opportunity to be generating insight in the type of work that MD Clone does and feeding it to organizations, to companies like yours, to make sure that that information is being used in the right way at the right time to ultimately impact patient care, outcomes, and ultimately health. So it's been exciting to have you on our Talk Data podcast this morning. And I hope we can hear more about your adventures, hear more about your good the good work that your team is doing, the new work that your team is doing, the new way you're incorporating technology into that activity. And we will check in soon. But for now, please join us again on our next Talk Data podcast. And of course, in the meantime, visit the MD Clone website for more articles, data stories, webinars, and much, much more. Thanks for listening. And thanks again, Patty.